Emi Cosplay from Devil is a Part-Timer, Part 1, the skirt. The first thing I did was create a pattern using a sloper pattern I already had, and then I cut it out of this brown cotton, which is going to be my lining. And coincidentally, I had this in my stash. I then sewed everything together, and then I checked the fit to make sure it fit correctly, which it did. So I went ahead and proceeded to the main fabric, which is this dark brown gabardine that I also had lying around. I then created the waistband and cut everything out. I then sewed both the darts, the sides, and a little bit of the back up like lining, and then I attached the zipper. I then sewed the lining to the main fabric at the hem, turned it inside out, gave it a good press, and then I attached the waistband. The very last detail that I had to add was the hook and eye, which I sewed on completely by hand. And once that was entirely finished, my Emi skirt was done. Stay tuned for the next part of how I make Emi from Devil is a Part-Timer. Emi Cosplay from Devil is a Part-Timer, Part 2, the bow. So I picked up my pattern from this Japanese pattern book that I already had on hand, and then followed the instructions to make the pattern pieces, which were a whole bunch of rectangles. I then cut the fabric out from this purple fabric that I had already in my stash, and then sewed all the pieces together as per the instructions. Once the pieces were separately sewn, I began bunching them together to create the bow. And then I stitched down the fake knot with my sewing machine. The next thing I did was hand tack the raw edges shut, and then I sewed on the clip. The last thing that I had to make was the brooch. I cut out a piece of cardstock following this template, and then glued it to a frame. I then put the epoxy sticker over it, and then hand tacked it to the bow. And with that, my Emi bow was done. Stay tuned for part 3 on how I make Emi from Devil is a Part-Timer. Emi Cosplay from Devil is a Part-Timer, Part 3, the vest. I started with my base pattern, which is this new look vest pattern that I've had for a while. I then made some modifications to the front to make it a double breast vest. I then cut the pieces out of my lining fabric and sewed them all together. After that, I checked the fit on my mannequin, and then I cut the pieces out of my main fabric, which is this gray gabardine I've had in my stash. One thing to note here too is that I also added interfacing to the front and side front panels. I then sewed all the pieces together up to the shoulder bits, and then I attached them to the lining. I sewed the two together at the neckline and the armholes, and then I very carefully sewed the sides together. Next thing I did was add in the buttonholes using my buttonhole maker, and then I added the buttons. The last thing I had to do was tighten the buckle in the back and hand tack it shut. And with that, my vest was done. Stay tuned for the next part on how I make Emi from Devil is a Part-Timer. Emi Cosplay from Devil is a Part-Timer, Part 4, the wig. Okay, so the first thing I did was figure out what color I wanted. So I ordered a couple swatches from Art of Wigs, and I settled on this one. The first thing I did was section off the side, and then I chopped the bangs. I then chopped a little bit off the side to frame my face. I then cut the side bangs on the left side, and on the right side, I first braided it so that way it would be even, and then I chopped off the excess. I then went ahead and thinned out the back to give it more layers and some more movement. I then heated up the sides with my hot iron, and then used my spray can to curl it into a subtle loop. I then sectioned the bangs into little points and gave it a good spritz. I then went to work on the final section, the ahoge. I tied off a small portion off the top with a hair tie, cut it a bit, and then sprayed it and shaped it. And with that, my Emi wig was done. Stay tuned for the next part on my Emi Cosplay from Devil is a Part-Timer. Emi Cosplay from Devil is a Part-Timer, Part 5, the sword. So the sword I'm using is this foam larp sword that I got off of Amazon, and I first went ahead and chopped off the side parts of the hilt. The reason being, I'm going to replace it with my own versions. I first drew a pattern on paper, and then I transferred it to 6mm EVA foam. I stuck a wire in between the layers, and then put them together with contact cement. The wire allows me to bend and shape the foam with ease, and then I went ahead and used contact cement to glue them to the sword. After the glue dried, I taped off the sections and spray painted it gold. And after that, I took off all the painter's tape. The last thing that I had to do was add the gems on, which were just leftover gems from my stash, and with that, the sword was finally done. Stay tuned for the final part where I show you the full cosplay.